Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Welcome to our show. We have an amazing lineup of guests this evening. It's April 29th, 2019, and yes, it's election year in Virginia once again. So my first guest, gotten to know this guy over the last few months, and I wanted you to kind of meet him as well. He is a candidate running for the Commonwealth Attorney position, the Democratic nomination here in Fairfax County. Really great guy. We're going to devote 2 segments to him because this is a pretty critical position. And I really want you to get to know him. So thank you, Steve Descano, for coming, sir.
Thank you, Cesar, for having me. I really
appreciate you giving us your time. I know it's super busy. I know you're talking to folks. I know you're kind of getting out there, but I thought it'd be a good time for you to maybe just get an opportunity to share who you are with people. Like, how? Why? What are you doing this for, right? I mean, help me understand, or help the audience understand, like, what drives you?
Oh, well, I think that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that. Yeah. And really, I have always been driven by this idea that we need to serve others. That is something that has stuck with me from a very early age. Nice. And it's what drove me to go to the United States Military Academy at West Point and serve as a U.S. Army officer. It's the same thing that drove me to become a federal prosecutor under the Obama administration and to get involved in the community. And it's the same thing that drives me now to serve a community, to serve people, particularly in this position which is very powerful, but is not necessarily serving all of our community right now.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. I mean, I think, again, anyone that I meet, I thank, because quite frankly, the Boy Scouts for me was the highest level of hierarchical collective command and control structure I could tolerate. So lots of respect for people that serve. What was it? I mean, obviously you were, your worldview, your upbringing, something compelled you to pick that path. Like maybe tell us a little bit about what you think drove that choice, that life choice.
Absolutely. Neither one of my parents went to college. I grew up in a working class family in South Philadelphia and the Philadelphia environs. And what I saw was my parents, through hard work and perseverance and a lot of luck, were able to build a very, very nice life for myself and my sister. But as I got older, my father was always very cognizant of telling me about people who were less fortunate and telling me about how lucky that our family was to have had those opportunities. And I felt compelled at a young age just to give back to a society that allowed my parents to be able to build up a family for themselves. And that is actually the part of my worldview that really put me in touch with service. But as I got older, as I got to see exactly how much luck was involved in that, it wasn't just hard work, and I got to see how different systems were stacked against different people and how there was real unfairness and unjustness in the world. That really turned my self-conception of service towards serving others, but with a goal of creating more equality and creating more justice in the world through that service that I was undertaking.
So what was that like growing up in that community? I mean, I just, when you say, Philly and just, I imagine like a real sort of diverse and kind of working class. What was that like? Oh,
it absolutely was. The house I grew up when I lived in South Philadelphia was your traditional red brick row homes that were built right after the war. And the neighborhoods were very, very diverse, and it was one of those type of neighborhoods where everybody would all the parents, they would leave for work early in the morning before the sun came up, and they would all leave the house at the same time, and they would all come back at about the same time because everyone worked shift work at that point. Most people at various plants. My father worked at DuPont he's a 40-year man at DuPont. He's very, very proud of that. Yeah, that's something, if you were to meet him today, that'd be one of the first things that he would tell you, because they don't make many of those anymore. And it was just one of those neighborhoods where on the weekends, the same thing. Everybody would come out of the same house, fathers, mothers, and kids, and just play in the neighborhood. It was one big community that was incredibly diverse, incredibly welcoming, and incredibly supportive of each other.
That's one of the things I think was really cool growing up as well. You had all these different kids, right? There was always someone to play with.
That's right.
And play something with, right? I mean, it was just like this diverse community that is really more of a microcosm of a lot of where our country is now and where it's going. So people that have been exposed to that generally are not as, I guess, uncomfortable with the change that's going to happen. I mean, do you feel that may have prepared you for some new things in life?
Oh, I think so. I think there is definitely, growing up with a background where you're exposed to a lot of different things. I really do think it gives you an appreciation for other people's views of the world, their experiences, and really what the value of hearing people with different opinions and different backgrounds, right? Because you can be the most woke person in the world, but your lens is still your lens, right? And having a relationship and being comfortable asking others for their experiences and their background, I think is fantastic. And, I noticed, from my time in the military, there were a lot of people who particularly came to West Point who weren't necessarily from a community like that. They came from very homogenous communities because West Point pulls from every single state in the Union.
Sure.
And I got to make friends and see people and essentially grow up with people in this environment that had no experience with that type of diversity, but because the Army is incredibly diverse, just time meeting people and getting to know people, it really built an appreciation in them very, very quickly. And so I actually feel very, very fortunate, not only for that experience, but for the experience of growing up in a diverse neighborhood where I didn't have to go through that culture shock the first time at age 18.
Oh, yeah. We'll get into the details of your issues and positions in the next segment. But I really wanted folks to kind of get that from you, kind of your worldview. Because I think that prepares a person, better or worse, for what they will deal with. And you bring that sort of worldview, those experiences, into everything you do as an adult. Some have positive, some have very negative experiences. So that's why I wanted to kind of get a level set of what your background was. And it sounds like you got it all, man. You had stability. 40 years at DuPont, man. You should be proud of it. No one does that with companies anymore.
That's right.
I mean, it's just like that's a rare thing. So, but I'm sensing there's an apple tree here. So let's peel back on the apple a little bit in terms of some of the other things that you value. In terms of, we talked about the dedication, the service,
sure.
The values that you hold. What's the one thing you might want to let people know in terms of who you are?
That's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. Really, I think the one thing that I would want people to know is that I am just someone who really cares about the community and Fairfax County. I first came down to Fairfax County. I was recruited by the Department of Justice to come down here out of law school to be a federal prosecutor, and I did that. And I traveled all around the country. But the thing that I really got from that was I lucked in to this incredible community of Fairfax County. And my wife and I, we never want to leave here. This is our home. Our 7-year-old daughter Charlotte was born here. This is the only home that she's known, and I've come to love it for a lot of the reasons that we talked about, the diversity that we have and all the opportunity that we have here. And it's because of that love for the community that I've been so involved in the community in so many different ways. We talk about, of course, being very involved in the Democratic Party locally, but being involved in organizations like NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia. I was on the board of that for a number of years. I was heavily involved for years with the Fairfax County NAACP on their criminal redress and criminal reform committees. And I was also one of the founding members of the county's police civilian review panel. So what I'd really like people to know about me is I love this community. I care about it. I have stakes here because I want to build a community that's fair. I want to build a community that's just, because this is where I live and this is the place where my daughter lives and where she's going to grow up.
That's great, man. I mean, it's rare to kind of put all that stuff together for people, and I think, first of all, Fairfax County, you probably can't pick a more diverse county.
That's right.
It's got it all, right? And it needs so much, right? And I don't think people can truly appreciate how much is needed by so many different segments, right?
That's right.
So what's, again, we'll get into the issues in the next segment, but high level, what's the one thing you probably want to highlight as being different from any other candidates or any other people in these positions that you're shooting for?
Well, it's, this position is so important, right? It's the leader of our criminal justice system. And I come at it from a different perspective than anyone who has held it before. Because I come at it from a perspective of being a federal prosecutor, which is having that prosecutorial experience, but being on the federal system, which is a very, very well-run system. And the people who've had this job over the last 50 years or so have all been insiders. They've all been part of the same culture. And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to bring not anymore the good old boy network or the system that only works for some people, but a new perspective, a reform perspective that is going to be focused on justice and equality for all of our communities. And for me, that is really the driving distinction in this race.
So tell me about why you think that hasn't been done thus far. Why do you think that's the case? Well,
you know, I think that it just goes back to the fact, in my opinion at least, that we have had the same culture in that office. We've only had 2 Commonwealth's attorneys in Fairfax County since 1967. And my opponent, he was the hand-picked successor of the gentleman who had it for decades. So what we really have is we have a culture in our criminal justice system in Fairfax County that is stuck in the past. I know that Fairfax County has changed a lot since 1967.
A little bit.
Right? It's gotten much bigger, it's gotten more economically powerful, it's gotten more diverse. And I don't think that the culture of that office and therefore the culture of our criminal justice system has caught up. And I just don't think that we've had people in that office who are thoughtful practitioners, who really go out of their way to get involved in the community and see what the community needs. To the culture we have now, it's very much a culture of, well, this is how we've done it, and it has seemed to work in the past. But what they don't realize, because they're not out in the community, is that it's not working for everyone. And I think that's really the reason why we have this problem.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've brought a view that community is an absolute must in doing not just this job, but a lot of stuff, and that's going to be refreshing. Quickly, while we'll go to another segment, just tell us a little bit about what your top initiative would be, if you needed to change something, because this will lead us into the next segment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I like to think of this as a values proposition, right? Your criminal justice system is run by individuals, and the leaders and their values are what drive the values of the system and therefore how it operates. To me, I think we need to bring the values of community, equality, and justice into the system. And what I will do is I will seek out data and find out where we don't have that equality, that justice, and do everything in my power to bring it to the office.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that. We're going to come back in the second segment here, folks. We've got the issues on the table. Please come back and listen to Mr. Discano answer some tough questions.
I can't believe we broke Old Man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We?
Go to the door, ask for the ball back.
Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtleback.
You're so dead.
I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go.
Yeah, remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are.
Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Yeah. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rooftop life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here is about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here, back with our second segment, and my guest, Mr. Steve Descano. He is a candidate for the Commonwealth Attorney's Office here in Fairfax County, and we're going to ask him some pretty tough questions now. Steve, again, thank you for hanging out. Let's talk about the issues here. You'll have to deal with these if you're successful. Let's talk about the number one issue you see out there. Well, what's the top issue you got out there that we need to address or know about?
Well, I think one of the big issues that we need to talk about is cash bail.
Yeah.
Cash bail is as you know, it's an issue that has been playing out nationally, and it's something that people are...
It's a two-tier system now, right?
Exactly. It's a two-tiered system of justice, and really that is... cash bail is a great place where we see the microcosm of a two-tiered system of justice.
So for the folks at home, explain like what happens to me, what happens to someone else. What's the setup there?
So the setup is basically this: if you are arrested, a judge is going to make an independent determination if you're dangerous and if you're a flight risk. And if you're any of those things, you are held pre-trial until your trial. But if you are deemed to not be dangerous and not to be a flight risk, you are eligible for release. Pre-trial, and we actually want people to be released pre-trial because they go home to their families. They're living in their communities, they're working their jobs, supporting their families. It's actually a very, very good outcome societally. But unfortunately, in Fairfax County, approximately 46% of the people who are eligible for pre-trial release have to pay money before they can go home. And there's no reason for it. It doesn't keep us more safe. All it does is punish poor people for being poor. As a matter of fact, the great majority of people in Virginia who can't afford their bail are held on a very, very small bail. And so what we have is when we have a cash bail system, we have rich people who are going free, they're getting one tier of justice, and poor people who are being held. And when you're being held that way, what that means is, very, very quickly, you can lose your job, and if you lose your job, you lose your house. Right. And if you can lose your house, you might lose your kids. And that can all happen in a couple of days, right? And not only that, being held in pretrial because you can't pay bail, even for a day or two, it creates recidivism problems. You are much more likely to commit crime down the road. So you as a taxpayer are paying over $220 a day to keep someone in jail and to cause more crime down the road. It's an issue of fairness, but it's also an issue of waste and being smart on our criminal justice system.
It almost creates the very criminals that we're trying to rehabilitate.
It absolutely does.
There's a disconnect there. It's counterintuitive. So what's the fix?
Well, the fix is actually fairly simple. The judges, they do make the final decision on if someone has cash bail or not. But in the great majority of cases, judges tend to listen to the prosecutors. So what we need to do is I would need to tell my prosecutors in the office, and there are approximately 36 prosecutors in the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. They're the ones who are in court every day. I just need to write a policy to tell them to not ask for cash bail. And in the great majority of cases, the judges will listen to that, and they will let people go free on other personal recognizance bonds and with other services that are going to help people while they're out. And the most effective way to get someone back to court for their trial is not cash bail, it's not electronic ankle monitoring, it's a phone call. So we can do that. So really it's all just a matter of having the political courage and the political will from the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office to write that policy and enforce it, and we can stop punishing poor people simply for being poor.
That sounds very transformational. I like it.
Thank you.
I did hear, and this was a little sad, that the average person or family in America can't absorb a $400 or $500 emergency.
Right.
That just tells me that there's a lot of people that are hanging on. Here in Fairfax County, there's a lot of children in our public schools on free lunch meals and programs. So, I like that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say to that point, a lot of people hanging on and people not being able to take on a small expense. We have to realize that our crimes in Fairfax County, and as in most places, are really driven in a lot of ways by economic desperation. Crime really is the result of decreased opportunity, increased poverty, which leads to increased crime, and all cash bail is doing is increasing that opportunity, which is very much leading to more crime.
All right, sold. I like that fix. That's good. What about, we're talking about the result, there's a cause and effect, so mass incarceration, right? That's another topic.
Absolutely. Mass incarceration is a huge problem, and it is a huge priority of mine. And what people don't realize, because it's, not everybody is, they're living their lives, they're not up on all this criminal justice stuff. A lot of people think the driver of mass incarceration are the police or the judges, when in reality it is the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor is the most important and powerful person in that criminal justice system. The police can bring you to the courthouse door, but the prosecutor lets you in, and the judge's hands are tied most of the time by the prosecutor. And mass incarceration has been driven by two factors. The first one is the number of people in pretrial for cash bail. So if we get rid of that, we're getting rid of one driver of mass incarceration. But the other one is the individuals, and these are for individuals who are in prison, prosecutors charging more felonies instead of misdemeanors than they used to.
Why is that?
There has just been this move in the last few decades towards this tough on crime rhetoric. We started to see it in the 70s and 80s, and quite frankly, it was free to prosecutors to say they're tough on crime and to put people away for a long time, and it helped get them reelected, right? Because it's easy to stand there and beat your chest every couple of years and say, I'm tough, I'm this, I'm that.
Oh, no one does that. Politics.
You never, not in politics, right?
No one does that.
Yeah.
So again, that's driving then what? Just the numbers of people that are charged with felonies.
That's right.
Okay.
And when you're charged with a felony, a felony is a higher class of crime than a misdemeanor. And people need to realize that a prosecutor can charge the same thing in a number of different ways. And you can get real justice through a misdemeanor charge, but misdemeanors are capped in terms of the amount of jail time that you're looking at. So when we're talking about mass incarceration because of an increase in felonies, what we are talking about are the increase in the number of people who are prosecuted for crimes that have mandatory minimum sentences, or prosecuted for crimes that have jail terms of decades. And when you start to add those people up year after year in our prisons, they're there for a long time, and that's one of the huge drivers of mass incarceration.
Wow. So again, the fix is?
The million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
The fix is, again, it is a policy change in the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, because this all is within the discretion of the person in charge. So what I would want to do is I would want to, instead of always defaulting to felonies, I would look to try to charge misdemeanors where they're available and they're appropriate. And beyond that, I'd like to take it even a step further. When we would normally, when in the past the office would charge misdemeanors, I would like to look to create diversion programs and look to divert. And what I mean by that is giving people the opportunity to go into programs so that they can get at the root causes of their issues, the root causes of why they did what they did, and come out on the other side and not have to be involved in the criminal justice system or ever see a day in jail or prison.
Yeah, I think that's key, right? I mean, especially if we invest in people that have made a mistake initially. I'm not talking about the habitual offender. Right. I'm talking about the person that, for some reason they meet some standard that it's a felony, and I'm not trying to minimize crime here. What I'm trying to do is, there was stuff that, me personally, I could have gone either way. I mean, had not the Boy Scouts been there, I'd been robbing banks by now. I mean, it's just, people make dumb choices when they're young. And if we're in a mindset, the institution will just deal with it rather than solve it or pre-solve it. I think that's not going to change anytime soon.
I think that's absolutely right, and you make two great points there. The first one is that this is an investment in people, right? We have to realize that these individuals are still our neighbors, and that investing in people through things like expanded diversion programs not only does it cost less than incarceration, but you get better outcomes, and you get people off of the track of increased crime and recidivism and back to their communities. The second thing is, you mentioned young people. We know that the part of the brain that deals with risk doesn't develop until your mid to late 20s. So we need to realize that. I
was thinking 50s, but.
Well, I'm maybe for an exceptional case.
Right.
But we need to recognize that, because even for those young people who do things, there's still a great opportunity if we invest in them to get at the root cause problems and keep them from that cycle of increased crime and recidivism that's going to ruin their lives, where they could be, with the right investment, key members of our society going forward.
That's a perfect analogy, because if you do invest here early, these people potentially will become taxpayers and contributors.
That's right.
So, and that's why it's very hard for me to constantly talk about this, but that's the difference between someone that has like a vision or faith and hope that the future is going to be better versus what's my business return on this dollar, this quarter, this year. Government doesn't work that way. These programs don't work on a quarterly, year over year return. It's a leap of faith. But given the right management and guidance, these things can turn out successful. I love the idea of investing in people that show potential. Some people you just can't save. We talked about the habitual offender. That's not going to be doable. But for some of these people, I think something like this is perfect.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And as a matter of fact, you talk about having a vision and wanting to implement it. I actually, I have a 20-page plan that I wrote on reform of our criminal justice system. It's on my website, stevedescano.com. I call it Progressive Justice. And really what you'll see is 20 pages of in-depth research of things that we can change to make our system better. But you will see throughout every single one of those proposed reforms is the idea that if we invest in our people up front, we are going to build a stronger community.
Absolutely. And I just, whatever we can do to keep kids off drugs, we have a huge problem. It's emerging here in this country. Is that something that's targeted in what you were trying to talk about, this 20-point thing as well?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. We talk in that progressive justice. I talk about substance abuse issues because it is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. We've seen it that things like the opioid epidemic doesn't know economic boundaries, doesn't know magisterial county boundaries, and what we need to do is we need to help these individuals, right? Because drug abuse is a illness, right? These people need help. We can't prosecute our way out of an illness. And what we need to do is we need to give them opportunities to get the help that they need, but that's only half the job. The other part of the job is to, when they have their substance abuse under control, mm-hmm. we need to allow them to come out on the other side with the opportunity to get a good education, to get a house, to get a job, so that they stay away from that, so out of desperation they don't go back into drug abuse and crime. And really it's doing both of those things that's important here, not just doing one or the other.
Yeah, and that's one of my pet peeves is investing in that type of program, in those sort of support groups. They really do pay off in the end, because then you're not dealing with housing someone for an entire life, because that is expensive.
It absolutely is. And it actually kind of goes back, the criminal justice system is very interrelated. When we talked about the difference between felonies and misdemeanors a few moments ago. A felony will follow you around for the rest of your life, so the programs that we need to build for these individuals help them get clean, get their addiction under control, but allow them to avoid that felony record.
Mr. Descano, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Folks, here's a guy you want to check out, stevedescano.com. 40 years, his dad at DuPont, man. Apple Tree. Check him out. Thanks again. We'll be right back with our next segment.
Your time is gonna come. Your time is gonna come. It's up to you to reach out to be that friend who comes along. Your day is gonna come.
When you make a friend, you make a difference.
Your day is gonna come.
Friendship. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Good one, son.
Last summer, my new dad took me on vacation. First, we went deep sea fishing. Wow!
I'm so proud of you, son.
And then we went on Thunder Shark. That was awesome! Let's go again. 3 times. I gotta say, it was pretty cool.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
What's it feel like when a woman's having a heart attack? Chest pain, like there's a ton of weight on your chest. Severe shortness of breath. Unexplained nausea. Cold sweats. There's an unusual tiredness and fatigue. There's unfamiliar dizziness or lightheadedness. Unusual pain in your back, neck, jaw, one or both arms, even your upper stomach are signs you're having a heart attack. Don't make excuses. Make the call to 911 immediately. Learn more at womenshealth.gov/heartattack.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination.
Honey, have you seen my cell phone?
But don't just imagine.
My park came to life?
Ooh, a plot twist.
Use STEM to build. Create.
She did it.
And change the world.
Who's with me?
I'm more of a 2 feet on the ground kind of guy.
gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Thanks for coming back. Our third segment. It's election time and we're into primary season. My next guest is Rachna Sizemore Heizer. She is a candidate for the school board at large. This is a county-wide position, so it's really important that you get to know her. We appreciate her being here and sharing her time with us. Rachna, thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited to come talk to you about my candidacy and why I'm running for school board.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
I am running, first of all, because I'm a parent and a longtime advocate who's worked on disability justice and juvenile justice issues, but really because I'm a parent of a kid currently in our schools and one who graduated, who spent their entire careers in Fairfax County. And what I learned very early on with my own children is that we have a great school system for those kids that fit easily in their bucket. Right? If you're kind of in your lane, we do great, but if you're not, we can do a lot better.
Yeah, I was a squiggly line kind of
right?
kid, so.
My kid's like way left field kid. And, what I found was that when he had issues, I advocated for him, but I have luckily born with these skills and talents that I could take what I advocated for him and make change for other people. And that's something that I've always felt as a passion of mine, that if I can enact change that helps others along with helping my kids, then I should do that. Because I was born with this privilege of being able to do that, so I should do that for others. But I'll tell you how I got started was with my own kid. My son especially has autism. He's got a disability, but he's also a brilliant musician. But his entire educational career, he was seen for all the deficits of his autism and not the strengths of his music. And I realized that we are a deficits-focused system. If you are a need in Fairfax County, you become your need. And my daughter, when she had mental health issues, the first thing they told us was, let's take her out of her advanced academics program. And I said, but she's capable in there, let's support her mental health needs. She became that need. And so my son, when he was young, and I went to his back to school night in 2nd grade. It's the first time he was in the gen ed classroom, and I walked in that classroom, and honestly, I was so excited to see his desk with everybody else. And instead, I found his name tag at a table in the back of the classroom with the 4 other children that were mostly spending their days in the self-contained autism classroom, and no other child. And it wasn't an intentional thing by the school. They just didn't understand inclusion. They didn't see, I realized they didn't see him as a whole human being. They just saw him as a disability. And I think that's what we do for a lot of our kids. We don't see them as whole, holistic human beings. So what I want to do on the school board is I want to flip our educational model to a strengths-focused model. Where we look at every kid, no matter what program they're in. What do you like? What are you good at? Let's start there, so then we build up your confidence and self-esteem. So then if you have deficits, you're open to working on them, but we still value you, whether you're an academic powerhouse or a musician like my son, who, by the way, 8 years after that, auditioned on Broadway, to my daughter, who has some mental health challenges, to someone who's in gen ed, right? And we make them feel stupid because they're not going to Harvard. We should flip that.
This is transformational. I love it.
Yeah.
I think, what are you hearing as far as feedback when you communicate this message to people?
I started doing this message, honestly, a long time ago. This is not something new because I'm running for school board. I'm running for school board because this is a message that was already resonating. My son and I actually presented at the National Education Association. They had a symposium on the promise of public education, and we talked about strengths-focused education. And as I've been going around talking to constituents and voters, a lot of people are really nodding their heads saying, yeah, my kid wasn't seen, or my kid developed this. You're right, we need to start with that. We have kids that are stressed and anxious, and as I tell people, look, would you want to spend your whole day being seen for all the things you weren't good at? How would that make you feel? How do you think it's doing to our kids? And they're like, you're right. So I think it's a transformational message that's really resonating. And even our teachers want to foster curiosity and interest. And our educators, well, it's hard to do that if you're always focused on all the things the kids can't do.
Yeah, I think institutionally people might push back because, quite frankly, I think this is something that should have been all along happening.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so what's that been like? I mean, are you...
I think it's got a difficult thing to put across the board consistently. The other reason I'm running, honestly, for school board is as someone who's had a child in the school, who's done work with parent groups across the county for many, many years and worked within the school system. I'm the only parent for a long time on the Fairfax County Inclusion Work Group. And that came out of that incident with my son where he was segregated in the back of the classroom, and I realized we don't know what inclusion is.
Right.
And so I lobbied for and I started this work group, and we recently revised all of the IEP forms, which is the forms that they use for kids with disabilities to drive their educational. We revised all of them for the entire county. And we revised them to focus on strengths. We revised them to focus on inclusion. So yes, I think it's a process. I think it's difficult, but I think our educators, our administrators want to educate our kids to make them successful. And so I think they are open to it. So there hasn't been a lot of pushback on it. The question is, how do you then operationalize it?
Right.
How do you take this transformational policy and operationalize it?
This would be disruptive.
Yeah, it would be. It's different. And I think, honestly, one of the biggest barriers is our high-stakes, punitive, standardized testing.
Oh, yeah.
Because that makes us have a very narrow focus on only academics instead of seeing what kids are interested in, right? Like, not everybody should go to college, and not everybody needs to go to college to be successful.
Right.
And we shouldn't be making
and not be
kids
labeled a failure because you don't.
Exactly.
Right.
And not be labeled a failure. My son, who has got autism and severe language processing issues, even when he was far along into his music and performing 40 times a year, and we sat in a meeting with his principal in 6th grade and said, in planning his high school, saying he doesn't need these classes because he's not going to college. And the principal looked at me and said, "What do you mean he's not going to college?" Like I was a failure as a parent because I'd already recognized that my son had a different, viable, beautiful path. And that's the attitude that I think can be addressed first.
So I think this would make the county sort of a sought-after place to be for parents just in general, because this completely shifts the way we're teaching and people are allowed to learn.
It is, and I think it allows for more creativity. It allows for more of the soft skills. It allows for kids to develop all sorts of talents. And it doesn't mean we take away the academic rigor, right? An academic rigorous path is a perfectly viable path we should provide, and we do provide. It just means we stop negating the other paths that are equally valuable and let some of our kids who want to be on those paths flourish. And that's what, and I think it would make us a holistic system. I'm a college professor, and so I see what's happened to our students for this heavy academic focus with the loss of the other skills. And I have students who lack the critical thinking, who lack the teamwork, who lack the ability to really explain their points persuasively, the skills you need in the workplace. And I think if we took away from this rote academic focus and focused on all of the holistic skills you need in a way that is something you're interested in and passionate about, then you really learn. And I think that'll help our kids be successful in college or in the workplace.
No, that's I love it.
Thank you.
Everything you're saying. Again, I'm into transformational ideas and being the disruptor. Ask around.
I went to Berkeley. I started my advocacy in high school. I led a walk out of my high school for overcrowding. So I have been a disruptor for a long time.
Some people would say that's a bad thing. I think it's a badge of honor.
Societal change doesn't happen without the people who are at the forefront with the transformational ideas.
Let me ask you a little bit of a tough question. This sounds great. How does this get implemented? We talked operational, but funding. I mean, what's that going to take?
So the funding is the tricky part. There's, as someone who's worked with the Board of Supervisors, who's worked with our state level, I recently got a diploma change put in place at the state level. I have experience in working collaboratively with our leaders to work on funding our schools and supporting our schools. So the biggest thing I think we need to do is lobby our state legislators, and hopefully if we can get the right people in office, to repeal the Dillon Rule. The Dillon Rule in Virginia prevents localities from really taking ownership of their taxes and other programs to do what's needed for their localities. And I think that's the first start.
Yeah, and for the folks that don't understand that at home, it binds municipalities and counties into a level dictated by Richmond.
Yeah, Richmond tells us what taxes we can have, what taxes we can't have. Even things like zoning laws. If we want to have more affordable housing, we're limited by the inability. The Dillon Rule essentially, this is my attorney coming up, essentially says that we're only allowed to do what's explicitly given to us. And that really limits what we can do, and that limits what we can do in Northern Virginia for what we need for our schools.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, that's why I go back, it's funding.
Yeah.
These are great, but they have to be priorities. and they have to be championed. And it sounds like you're the champion for this.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the big things, funding is important, but honestly, in some ways, it's just a culture change. Right, and one of the cultures is getting a move away from Richmond on these standardized testing, so that opens up creativity and opens up space. But in some ways, it's just a way to get like I did with the IEPs, where we flipped the focus to special education, we flipped it to general education focus. You can flip the focus to strengths focus while still teaching the academics. But you've got to have buy-in from your administrators, and you've got to have buy-in from the teachers, and that's getting them to understand what's the value in the system.
No, and I think, going back, if we look at the way the curriculum is taught, that was written when versus what the students' needs are today.
Well, and that's the thing that I don't think we realize. I started learning this in the disability population. We have these complex disabilities, but we have a diverse population of learners. We have a diverse world, and it's a different world.
Right.
So we've got to adjust how we teach them anyway.
So I was in Catholic school for a while. They didn't allow us to write left-handed.
That's really, I've heard that.
And I will tell you, I mean, I write with both hands now, but I just think if I wasn't exposed to that frustration because you had to write right-handed. I mean, that's just a small example, so I can't imagine.
Well, I'll tell you, like, my son, I'll give you another example. He's this brilliant musician. He taught himself to play music at the age of 3.
Wow.
By 8, he was teaching himself guitar by watching John Mayer concerts on YouTube.
Wow.
But meanwhile, at 10, he was in the self-contained autism classroom, and no one in that class was invited to audition for their school's talent show, because the school couldn't wrap their head around the thought that somebody in the autism class could have a talent. And again, it wasn't intentional. There's just a blind spot. And I think we have a lot of those, like English second language learners. Why don't we have more honors than AP classes? Just because English is not your first language doesn't mean you don't have the academic ability, but we put them in this bucket.
That's right.
And those are the things that I want to try to adjust.
And that's what I mean. It sounds like this thing needs to be flipped and changed and totally rebuilt in some way.
Well, even like it does, and it's hard, right? And on the school board, you can only do so much. But the philosophy for everything that I do on the school board is how do we build collaborative, holistic, strengths-focused education, where we're all partners in educating our kids.
You've made the case to me. I'm sold. I just think you need to really get with the colleagues and certainly work on the prioritizations.
Well, and that's something I've been doing for a long time. I've had a decade of advocacy work, and as an attorney and as a management consultant and as an advocate, I know how to operationalize these things.
Well, that's excellent.
Thank you.
More power to you. Again,
thank you.
Get to as many folks. We're going to make sure we get your information, contact out there to the viewing audience, so they'll have an opportunity to go out to your website and all that.
Awesome. It's www.electrachna.com is my website.
Awesome, folks. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with our final segment.
I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions.
Love it.
Cross-referencing travel sites. And booking all your flights with those...
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like... Aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I thought I had it under control. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here?
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to team-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys. Preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
I'm ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here with our final segment and my last guest, certainly not least, Irma Corada. She is a candidate for the Braddock District Supervisor position here in Fairfax County. I think you're going to like her. I've read up on her. Irma, thank you for coming to the show.
Of course.
I'm
excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what compelled you, or what kind of went off where you had the light bulb to
run.
Yeah.
So I've been a resident of Fairfax County like almost all my life. I grew up here. I went to school here, and I've never really seen enough representation in Fairfax County elected officials.
Amen. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're totally fine. Yeah, there's not a lot of people who look like me. There's not a lot of Latinas who are on like elected official positions. And then when I grew up, I started doing more community organizing. So I'm a co-founder and organizer with La Colectiva, which is a social justice organization in Northern Virginia that pushes efforts around Latinx issues, racial justice issues, social justice issues. And this got more and more important, increasingly important to me. And it got to the point where I said, enough is enough. I think it's about time that we have someone who is in power and who is advocating not just for community members, but for every single one in Fairfax County, and truly representative of the diverse experiences and backgrounds that we have here in Fairfax County.
Very nice. I mean, I'm in Herndon. I know about diversity.
Yeah.
What's the Braddock district makeup look like? Is that representative of the county, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty on par with what the county is. The county right now, it's 1/3 of every resident in Fairfax County is an immigrant. 1 in every 3 households speaks a language other than English. I think it's 13% are Latino, and then you have around the same amount for Asian people, and then Black people. I think it's 9%. So it's a very diverse county, and I think we really need to start embracing that diversity and making sure that it's reflected in our policies and in our practices.
What's the biggest? What's the one initiative that you want to champion?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things that I want to champion. One of the really big ones that I'm really striving for and pushing for, and another reason why I decided to run for Braddock District Supervisor, is immigration. Making sure that we have a real, true inclusivity here in Fairfax County. 1 in every 100 residents right now in Fairfax County is in deportation proceedings, so they're fighting to stay in Fairfax County. And these are non-citizens, so they're undocumented people, and they're people who are green card holders or visa holders. And they're our neighbors, and I think it's really important that we start trying to make sure that they have the proper protections in place, that we as a county are addressing this with real urgency that it deserves.
How do we address that, though, at the county level? I mean, I know there's talk about providing some funding, or I mean, is that kind of what you're thinking about?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it's so there is an ordinance out right now. Fairfax for All is a coalition of immigrant rights advocacy groups, and there's an ordinance out that they have been trying to push for over a year now. And basically, it says that the county will end all voluntary collaboration with ICE. Then it would also set up a fund for legal representation, like a legal defense fund for people to help them fight their immigration case.
That'd be a huge change, because I know there's lots of things that touches. What kind of support does that have out there?
We've seen a lot of really great support. I think right now that ordinance specifically, I think there are maybe over 10 candidates for like local candidates, so school board and supervisors at large, who are endorsing that. And the whole talk around immigration has become a really priority, and people are really actually talking about it. So it's really exciting. I think there is a lot of potential, particularly going into 2020, around immigration in Fairfax County.
Yeah, another thing, I don't know if this is within but the whole housing, the schooling. I mean, what are some of those other priorities as you kind of look at this role?
Yeah, so I come from like a working family background, right? I currently am also a full-time employee trying to run this campaign, and I live in, I'm one of the only people who is a renter running as a candidate. So I think it's really important that when we are running our campaigns that we're reaching out to people who don't normally get spoken to or addressed or asked, what is your priority? A lot of the things that we've been hearing at the doors is people are really concerned about affordable housing. This has been an ongoing issue in Fairfax County. Fairfax County is one of the richest counties in the nation, and it's also one of the most expensive counties to live in. And so when people are here in Fairfax County and they're not making a living wage, it's reflective, and people are being pushed out further outside the Beltway, out to Manassas Park, Prince William County, Woodbridge. And I think affordable housing is really, has always been an issue, but now it's only going to get worse, particularly because there are, large corporations coming in, and it's just going to make things just so much worse than what it already is. And there's a real urgency in that one as well.
Should board members take donations from developers?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
that is 100% a conflict of interest.
I just had to ask.
Yeah. That is a conflict of interest, 100%, particularly because, I mean, you can't be in the pockets of developers and continue to advocate for your community.
Yeah, I think, and for me, it's not just affordable housing. It's a range of products that people can choose from.
Right.
Because if you're letting developers I'm not opposed to them making money.
Yeah.
More power to you. But if you're only providing high-end units, guess what? You're driving cost up and people out that can't afford those million-dollar units.
Exactly.
So for me, I like to speak in terms of a range of products offered in any development.
Yeah.
That way you're not imposing anything, right? I mean, I think there's different. I just wanted to get your understanding of that.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and I think we need to really think about it from also like an environmental perspective, right? If we have work, every county needs workers. Every county needs someone who will be doing janitorial work or blue collar jobs. And if we're not paying them a living wage, then they are forced to move out. But particularly also, even if we are paying them a living wage and they still can't afford to live here in Fairfax County, that's an issue. And then you have more cars on the road. You have more pollution going on. And we really need to start making sure that we're addressing affordable housing from like a holistic perspective.
Yeah, no, I'm sold. I'm with you. I think that's to me. I did a program once on, again, the number of units, and I think it's like 35,000 units.
Yeah.
Not affordable.
Yeah.
Just It was what,
yeah.
It's like.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess again, there'll be some transformation on the Board of Supervisors. It's going to be an entirely new board.
Yeah.
I hope it's a far more diverse board.
Yeah.
And more progressive.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. Yes, I think because there are so many candidates in the field right now. There's a lot of ideas and a lot of talk happening, and I think it's really starting to push a lot of people more to the left and making sure that that we're upholding the values that Fairfax County truly deserves as such a diverse county.
We'll be representative.
And we'll be representative. Yeah,
because
for sure.
Again, if I hear people say, "Well, that's the way we do it," I mean, I just want to scream.
Yeah.
Like,
that's the way we've done it.
I have a problem.
That's the way we should be doing it.
I have a problem.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't want to embarrass people pointing out something that they should have been doing.
Yeah.
But let's move on and past that, and let's actually do what needs to be done for constituents.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what kind of additional priorities are you looking to solve out there?
Yeah, so aside from immigration and affordable housing, I think it's really important that we also, our campaign and our values are driven by community members. Every time we talk to someone, we ask them, what is your priority? What is your need? And then they tell us, and I'm a data analyst, so I take all that data and I try and figure out, all right, what are we looking at? And so one of the main issues that people are always talking about is funding for schools as well. And I think we need to and everyone's always talking, like, we need to pay our teachers, but we also need to really start paying our support staff, our janitorial staff, our cafeteria workers, and then also county workers at large, making sure that everyone is making a living wage, that they have the benefits necessary to survive and then to thrive and age in Fairfax County, because that's really an issue. So that's another one of my priorities. And then also making sure that as an organizer, I know that there's real power in the collective. And so I really want to make sure that we're engaging and doing as much outreach to people as possible and bringing in, like you said, like that representation and that diversity to the table, and that we, as decision makers, are making sure that their input is being heard, their input is being validated, and that we're being held accountable to them as well. Because at the end of the day, like, all the power that we have isn't anything if we don't have people behind us.
You know, I think you make such a great point. I mean, from a business side, just analyzing data. People always talk about, well, government should be more like business. Or, you know, but in business, you invest in your people.
Yeah.
That's your number one resource. I mean, your technology, your secrets, all that's great, but unless you have the people at the operational level to carry out your strategy, you won't get the outcome you want. And if we want people to live a healthy, you know, life here and contribute here as much as they can, you have to invest, and investment takes dollars. Yeah. They have to generate that. So you're either bringing in revenue, you're bringing in corporations, or you're bringing in new taxes. I am not opposed to paying more taxes. I know some people are there, but maybe you identify people that can absorb it, especially when the economy is good.
Yeah, well, like you said, you're not afraid to pay more taxes. You're okay with paying more taxes. We've heard that same thing when we're talking to voters,
especially
when we're talking to people. Yeah, especially in the schools. I think it's more around, we've literally heard people say to us, I would pay more taxes if I knew that it was going towards a competitive pay for our teachers. If we knew that it was going towards our schools and that it was going to what I wanted to go towards. So I think it means just being more open about like where all our funding is going towards. It's already pretty open, but it's more about like making sure that it gets to the right people and it's being heard loud and clear.
Yeah, I think new technologies, new energy sources, you know, solar, wind, I mean, all that stuff, the county should be leading. If we truly are a leader, I mean, and we have the means, you know,
we should be investing in green renewable energy as well.
And why are we beholden to the power companies?
Exactly.
That dictate whether or not I can put a solar panel up on a municipal building. Or,
and that's a state issue. We need to really start making sure that that's a priority in Fairfax County, and that we're advocating for that in Richmond as well, and pulling together as many jurisdictions as possible to help us do that. And
well, you got to beat up on your local officials up and down, right? I mean, it just starts. They beat you up, you beat them up.
Exactly, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we really need to really start making sure that we're holding elected officials accountable as much as possible.
Well, Irma, thank you so much for coming on the show.
For sure.
We'll make sure everyone has your contact information. Folks, I hope this gave you a little bit of a preview on all the great candidates that are out there. I liked everyone here. In fact, I'm going to write them all a check. So come back for our next segment, and we'll see everyone soon. Thank you. Awesome. So this is where they put the mics, and then